Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Ma.K Man at YouTube with another Q&A session. Last week I fielded out an opportunity for you guys to ask personalised questions regarding your hobby, projects or general questions, as well as anything that's going on within the channel. Today I'm more than happy to answer them. Changing the format ever so slightly, I do like to add updates and extra fluff information content for a longer listening pleasure video. I'm pretty much intending to make all the fluff beforehand and then editing and recording the actual questions and requests as they slowly come in. So hopefully that will work out and make it a lot easier, quicker to make. A couple of quick updates. So I think I'm long overdue for a proper vlog and a formal update. My working conditions and everyday life has changed significantly. I used to have a main job and a casual job on the side with a few hustles, but everything has been rounded up as my main job has offered me full-time status with a significant promotion. I'll be doing that for a while, and collecting funds and working on my projects in the background until it's big enough and lucrative enough to launch and scale back my work. This will not affect the channel or my hobby in general, but projects such as the injection molding kit and the salt mines, a few events I'm working on, is going to have to take a back seat and delayed a bit further. But it's going to give me the stability where I'm almost guaranteed to achieve success and pull it off at a date where I'm very, very comfortable. No major updates on the YouTube front. The videos to expect to be released is a few armor videos, 3D printing and spark maker content, Mr. Cement SPB review, and a few finished models. Same goes for Facebook and other platforms. Hello there, Gino. In the way of short-term, small local Melbourne events, hobby-wise, I'll be attending as the Salt Mines with a table at Little Wars, 11th of May, 9 AM, free entry at the Kingston Arts Centre on the Nepean Highway. A table also on the main trading hall of the Japan Festival in Box Hill, May 19th, Sunday, Whitehorse Road, Box Hill Town Hall. Tickets are fairly cheap at about $3 to $5 at the door. Worthwhile, a few toy traders and a model railway layout as well. For larger events and official public appearance by myself, Salt Mines as well. Model Expo 2019 Sandown Park Exhibition Centre, 8th to 10th of June, which is the Queen's birthday long weekend. This is a huge event that I've reviewed in the past, so the previous content will show you what it's all about. It's also going to be my biggest display yet. And probably the best event of them all, Animaga Expo 2019. Not a lot of information, but you can still visit the website. Saturday 24th and 25th of August. Confirmed that it's booked at the Royal Exhibition Building, Carlton. I'll be hosting the modelling and GunPla building area as well as the competition, salt mine display, and hopefully unrevealing something pretty major of a garage kit of sort, as well as giving away some free kits. This is also a typical anime convention if that is your sort of thing, with other artistic endeavours and content to check out. Very heavily leaning towards video gaming and video game competition, which I know a lot of people cross paths in the hobby. This is the hustle and shout out segment of the video. K Scale Models is just about to release their M4 and M3 line of resin upgrades to the World War II's Sherman tank. Look forward to that, as well as some other interesting designs. All that good stuff can be bought on eBay. Gundam UK has a web store mostly for aftermarket goods and whatnot for the UK, Europe, but I suppose it could be shipped in other areas. A lot of interesting things. I've noticed if you like Gundam UK on Facebook. Quite often he'll have discount codes for special holidays and other things like 10-20% off and whatnot. For those living in Australia looking for the cheapest possible kits, which there is a massive variety online and in brick and mortar shops, in Melbourne, the western suburbs, Japan Toys. I'm good friends with one of the owner. Not really getting any kickbacks, just very impressed with their services the few times I've bought from them. Good Kodo and Gundam variety, but they heavily excel in the anime toys side of things. Very attractive prices, free shipping when you spent enough. The original mech contest hosted by Kamm is still on and got quite a while to go, so there's still time to enter build a kit. It has been quiet for a while, but there is promises of some updates with quite a few work in progresses still being posted and started. It's at least worth a look at to see some of the very talented and amazing work. If you're looking for some exposure or to build an audience, this is the perfect gig to cut your teeth with if you're doing some excellent work. On the front of 3D printing and the injection molding project, not a lot of major progress as we're waiting on some resources. Interestingly enough, SparkMaker has released and announced that they're going to be doing the heat resistant resin for the 3D printers, which is amazing news for manufacturing molds. It's got a maximum hardness rating as well as high temperature to 300 degrees. So the second that hits the market, you bet I'll be buying it and testing it. Very shortly, part 2 and a proper build from this SparkMaker review is going to come out in video form. I've done quite a few commission prints for friends of various models and constantly printing to learn about supports and quality, improving it. Really got my head around the medium and the idea, so can definitely make some great content. However, consumable, the LCD screen has eventually died, which I've ordered a replacement. Being an early batch, it's quite faulty, so I'm going through an interesting process of getting it back to work, which is completely documented and will be shared very shortly. As you all know, I love to buy all sorts of airbrushes, mostly the affordable and cheap ones on eBay and Amazon, to review and figure out what's good to sell on, recommend, and use opposed to the other big name brands. Come across some gems as well as some doozies. This has crossed my path multiple times. A 12 volt compressor in a small cylinder that operates for about 30 minutes. I've had a bit of trouble since purchasing it. It took about a month and a half to land on my door and fortunately has arrived faulty. I'm waiting for parts and a replacement, so at this stage it's a bit of a warning to avoid this until it's completely fleshed out. Though once fully operational, not too impressed with the power pressure specs, as well as the air valve is completely missing. I have a strong suspicion that this isn't going to be a very handy tool in the hobby, especially at the price that's fairly standard across all the sales platforms, but we'll wait until all the information has been filmed, all the tests are done, and I have a final verdict. So look forward to that, but I suspect more months will be waited in getting the parts, repairing it, as well as buying it from another source to see if it works out of the box from a different seller. Getting straight into the questions, Morgan H asks, can you tell us the advantages and disadvantages of each kinds of paint? Enamel, acrylic, lacquer. It'd be nice to have them all in one video. Excellent question. Now, I have covered this topic multiple times throughout various different videos. There is a video that summarizes everything together. However, it is quite ancient, called Paint Theory to Memory. It's in 2 parts before YouTube allowed you to go over 10 minutes. For more information, I will add that link down below, which will be worthwhile watching. What we'll do now is an abridged version and probably updated from my experience now rather than several years ago. Hobby paint is generally the same concept as industry or artist paints. There are several different times and formulations, though what we use as a suitable medium on plastic is lacquers, enamel and acrylic, which all has various different advantages and popularity, different preferences from older forms of modelling when enamels had lead back in the 80s, 90s. But with a change in technology, acrylics are quicker to dry, self-level a bit better, and generally less toxic, which is what's very important when teens are purchasing products to use unsupervised, opposed to the more laid-back attitude decades gone by. The easiest way to visualize the use of paint, I've got the Layman's GunPla guide right on screen. Acrylics is generally the easiest to use and ideal for beginners due to being the least toxic, safest to use indoors in the way of fumes and being water soluble in case you spill it, stain your clothes, that sort of thing. There has a few disadvantages of issues with drying, as well as not being the most adhesive friendly to material. It has a tendency of scratching off. It is also chemically solvent weak, meaning other solvents, enamel and lacquer, applied on top of acrylic, such as a clear coat, could cause problems. A lot of the time, if you play with drying and how long you need to allow your paint to chemically harden, you can do quite a bit of cheating. But for a beginner who's applying virtually wet paint on wet paint with only a few hours or minutes drying, lacquer is chemically the strongest solvent. It dries very quickly, but is extremely toxic when you breathe in, spill on your skin, and highly flammable. It is excellent to adhering to all sorts of surfaces and is fantastic as a primer. So you may rattle can it on your surface in the garage outside, then do all your hand painting, airbrushing, whatever inside. You are able to put enamel, which is also a very strong solvent. It can dissolve acrylic and cause all sorts of problems, but it has a great advantage of how long it takes to dry. It's a very heavy solvent and it takes a very long time for it to evaporate once applied, and during the time that it dries, it takes its time to self-level and create a very lovely effect. It also transports a heavier pigment, so the colours are normally more brighter, more vibrant. The metallics are pretty good. It's a very pleasant paint to use and can be thinned to the point of being in a state of water, and applied on the surface is known as a wash or a filter, and go into all the crevices, detail, panels, that sort of thing. You'll hear this as a panel wash or weathering method. Overall, the biggest advantage of enamel being slow drying, it's fantastic to hand paint. The streaks will eventually mellow out and melt down, and two, has a very strong adhesion. If you're very casual and not too fast, it can be applied straight to plastic without priming, and once untouched for a long period of time, generally has a good adhesion. Though for full chemical hardening, it does take about a week of drying, but it's generally dry to the touch after 1 to 2 weeks. Avoid cheap enamels, as they can be sticky and they never truly chemically harden or adhere and flake off over time. Artist oils, which has its advantages and disadvantages, could actually take far longer than a week to dry and suitable to a porous surface like a canvas rather than a solid surface. Hobby enamels are normally chosen to be the strongest adhesion to plastic, as well as the quickest to dry, even though it is the slowest drying medium out of the acrylics and the lacquers. Taking a step back to lacquers, is its greatest advantage is its quick drying, very strong adhesion, but it's also got very bright and vibrant colours. The formula is generally the same, and it doesn't matter what brand you go to, they can actually cross mix and blend colours, pigments, chemicals, that sort of thing. Enamels similarly, but when you cross the lines of oils and enamels, then you're playing with fire in the way of drying time. Going to acrylics, every acrylic chemical formulation is broken into multiple parts and is very dangerous to mix. Some of them has a stronger adhesion that's alcohol based like Tamiya, but others like Vallejo or artist based, water based, all those others are just not compatible with each other. They're generally known as synthetic acrylics, though the term acrylic can be very misleading as industry may refer to lacquers and strong solvents as acrylics, and I call them solvent acrylic. This is getting very complex, so when we talk about acrylic, we'll talk about the alcohol based such as Tamiya, or the polyurethane based like Vallejo, which is water soluble. The acrylics can be thinned down with water, but their best results is by their brand corresponding thinner. Tamiya has been known to also react very well with a high percentage isopropic alcohol and is very flexible, airbrushed or hand painted. In the way of application, enamels can be airbrushed. It's not too bad to do so, but there's not really that much reason to do so. Its hand painting has the most advantageous abilities. It's also a popular medium in rattle cans for a period of time until they're all released to lacquers, and lacquers is generally purely a only airbrush medium. Some do hand paint with certain special techniques to great advantage, as well as the Gundam markers being lacquer based, but this just takes a bit of trial and error. It's just not preferable for very large surfaces. In the way of advantages and disadvantages of applications, people's different styles vary and may disagree. My advice, once you know roughly the advantages and disadvantages of every medium, is to buy a small selection of each type and build one model only using enamels, only using acrylics, only using lacquers. And the most important factors are, one, if you enjoy using the medium, you like the look of it, it was a pleasure to use as a part of your hobby. And two, it's just compatible, you get the best results and you're happy with the finish. It's an ideal paint for you, and you may need to trial a few times until you sit with a medium that you really like, and from time to time you may use a little enamel or a little acrylic as a touch-up or a weathering method, just to try again to see if there's any change in your hobby. For me, my preference is lacquers. I find them to be the most superior paint out of all the types, though due to the heaviest disadvantage of being toxic, it may push a lot of people away who don't have an independent painting area, room, or have to go outside. My studio is annexed from the rest of the house, got a mask, got a respirator. It's absolutely perfect for me. The finish is vibrant, dries very quickly, blends well with an airbrush. I hand paint it very well. If I was to take a step back, for quite a while I was an enamel user, a rattle can or airbrush for base coating, and then touch up small details with acrylics. Many are purely an acrylic user, be it alcohol based or polyurethane based, which has the largest variety of colour and the most easiest to source. Some countries only have certain types and brands of paint available to them, and they use what's cheapest and easiest to acquire locally. The city I happen to live in has a very rich modelling culture and community, with many shops feeding into the different sub-cultures of the community, and I'm generally very spoilt for choice. I hope this answered your question. If you have any further queries, or a lot of this was a bit confusing and a bit too in-depth, and you've watched the paint theory video, get back in touch and I'm happy to answer further questions. My good buddy Tristan states, that middle picture, so suave, though I bet what he really wants to ask is more about the project or the box that I'm holding. Both of us sharing an interest in vintage kits and knowing that these larger 160 Bandai items are very tricky builds. Tristan is also the content creator of Plastic Oddities, is a modeler I'm a big fan of. Love his subject matter and the way that he has an interesting outlook in modifying, painting, finishing his kits. He documents it in a blog fashion on his channel. Very worthwhile checking out. It's quirky, it's odd, it's different. He also hosts and administers the Mushing Krieger Australia community. If that's your sort of thing, check it out. Links down below. The photo was taken at an Animaga event I was hosting a while ago, many years. I wanted a photo of myself with the box to show how big this beast is, being a largish bloke myself. The 160 80s era Gelgoog, absolutely huge, comparable to the perfect grade, which is what the young kids like to say. The instructions has that classic MSV artwork, and it was a general must buy, which I ordered online and shipped. Cost a fortune to get in, even though the kit is around the $20 mark retail. The thing about this is it's just like any other vintage build you would approach. Being hand tooled, there's a bit of warpage from the injection molding process, and it doesn't go together all that well. The bigger the pieces, the greater the warpage. In between Gunpla Builder World Cup projects and other things, I started having a go and gluing it with cement, filling it with super glue, and further with putty. I think at the time I had the intention of an absolute flawless finishes. Many struggle to build with this and either use heavy duty epoxy putty such as Biker Wolf many years ago, building one himself, or spending a lot of time. I found it to be a bit resource heavy, time heavy, and put it aside for a little while. I am itching to finish this off as it's very cool. I probably have a different outlook on how I do want to detail and finish it, but yeah, Gelgoog is my favourite mobile suit design, and love my vintage stuff. It's just a kit you don't see on the shelf for sale very often, and something that almost no one ever builds or reviews. So one day I'll pick this up and it will be a video. Benzone asks, are third-party non-Bandai Gundam kits worth buying? Have you tried scribing your own panel lines? If so, any tips? Thanks. I'll go with the panel line first. I've done it multiple times, either because I've had to fill a seam line and covered the panel and re-scribed it, or just for a little extra detail. The general trend is the use of these chisels, and they're absolutely fantastic at getting the width at different types and designs and templates. Back in the day we had the trumpeter panel scribe, or we used the back of our hobby lines. Getting a straight line is your best bet. Draw out a basic design where you would like your panels to be scribed and go very lightly. Remove the lightest amount of material and scratch it up about 1 to 2 dozen times, rather than doing 1 or 2 really deep cuts, which your blade will swivel and do very uneven lines, or actually gouge large chunks of plastic out and leave these very strange potholes and different width of panel line throughout your work. The use of Dymo tape or very thick curved tape as a guide to hold your blade, scriber, or chisel is a good idea. With any technique or method, with people who heavily do it, a lot of plastic practice is required, and the more you do it, the better you get. It also goes down to design, what's visually interesting and what's not. Sketch it out, have a look at it with a Gundam marker or a pencil. If you don't like it, scrap it. If you do, carve it out, and if you make any mistake, fill it, sand it up, and try again. To answer your second question, I say they are. I'm a very big fan. I have backpedaled and changed my stance on third-party and knockoff kits in past, where models were just being bootlegged wholesale. I was very close to the Gundam promotion community as well as the distributors, and saw the growth of the industry important for starting up competitions, communities, build meets, all that sort of thing. As it's very well entrenched in my country and other parts of the world, and if anything, starting to back off, I find a lot of these projects coming out of Asia from various brands such as Cube, Motor King and all of that. Very interesting. The experience is different to a Bandai kit. They're not using the same software or tools, molds, plastic, that sort of thing, but the engineering approach, the designs, makes for a completely different product and scale model. Some of them takes the approach of a traditional model where glue and whatnot is required. Others snap kits. If you've ever experienced anything from Kotobukiya or a different brand that does military kits or mechanized kits, Citadel or Model Collect, it is a more difficult build where seam line fillings required, parts may not fit as well, and a lot of painting is required to make it very nice. I'd reckon it's an excellent experience for anyone who modifies paints, goes quite far with their build and wants a challenge or something that Bandai hasn't done with great depth of thoughts and detail and engineering and gimmicks behind it. But if you're more into the camp of snapping pre-coloured and collecting it aspect, maybe not for you. As the product is also made by a smaller and less experienced team with a company with a few years under their belt, there are a lot more technical mistakes and modifications required to finish some of these builds. Speaking experience with the Motor King Zaku tank, I think this is a very cool kit. I love the detail, love the proportions, articulation, all that. It's the perfect kit that I don't think Bandai would have done justice with some of their kits being lackluster in detail and something to paint. It is very, very cool, but it's been quite challenging to put together. I've put one in the hands of someone who's purely a Bandai person and had a terrible time, but the amount of time I've been working on it, I've thoroughly enjoyed the curveballs thrown at me and fixing any of the issues. It's challenged me a bit, but it's overly not too difficult where I am. Also, being small batch releases that are not carbon copies, a lot of development, mold making and whatnot is put behind this, just like any other Bandai kit. It's safe to assume these are not going to be cheaper or underpriced compared to Bandai kits. In Asia, fairly easy to acquire. Other parts of the world, as the community is pretty squashed by Bandai purists, they're tricky to come across, but when you do, buy them knowing that the production run might be short or they may disappear. Collecting them is a challenge, and you may have to pay for a bit. If you see a project you want, grab it sooner rather than later, as if they do go out of production, they become scarce, rare, and their value inflates, as example of Dragon Ma.K and others. Jimbo asks, can you please shout out the PhD man-child, please? For me, thanks. And you did ask very, very nicely after all. He was last seen riding large golden fish, drinking to excess, and then getting hit by the very same train he was riding on. There was a promise of a large catch of unedited videos that can be slowly edited up and released. I'll check on him, and maybe some very sloppy, easy to make, quick content could be created with time pending or not. I think there's an idea of a ASMR 10-hour track of him moaning Gunpla's freedom and other absurd weirdness, which is very trendy on YouTube. Rebuild up that channel for some sort of major return. Let us know if that is particularly a good idea, or just stick back to the old classics. PhD Manchild is my second channel where I just do some general rants, layback, fun, silly videos that would definitely get me in trouble on YouTube. So all of that is dedicated there for freedom and venting. Alcohol and anime reviews, quick and dirty as they should. Yeah, sounds like something I'd have done. This content tends to be very crass and niche. Definitely not recommended for everyone, and I cannot personally recommend it myself either. To finish things off, we'll have a look at some comments and questions along my other videos. Alan Smith asks, what brand of lacquer thinner do you use, Alan? When I first started using liquid surface primer, I mixed it with, for some reason the rest of the comment cuts out, but I actually remember the conversation, which I think went on to Facebook. Alan happens to live in Australia as well, and I've recommended for sourcing good lacquer thinner in Australia is the premium acrylic thinner from Supercheap Auto. It's what I personally use. It has a fair amount of retardant to mix in and actually acts a lot like Mr. Leveling Thinner. I also remember that he said he used the Diggers lacquer thinner from Bunnings, and it's also sold in a lot of other outlets in Australia. The issue with the lacquer thinner is it's just general purpose thinner. It's the cheapest of the cheap. Acts very dry and has a habit of spider webbing or digging up a texture on a surface. It's no means recommended by the official guides or any sort of tutorial to use due to its quick dry and gritty nature. It's sold in large quantities for people who spray cars and do industrial level of spraying with the large spray guns to clean out equipment, soak and spray through. What the Diggers brand does recommend is the all-purpose thinner, which does have a bit of retardant in it and can achieve gloss finishes in clear coats without any frosting or issues. It's not too bad. I've used this before, but my preference is the all-purpose or the premium thinner by Supercheap Auto. The premium one is quite the lovely product and something I'll stick to for a very long time and probably been using for the past 10 years to memory, which has gone through various packaging and bottle changes over time. Anyone sourcing thinner overseas, always remember general purpose is the cheapest and only used for cleaning. Avoid for the hobby. All purpose is good for pretty much spraying top coat gloss, but premium, which only is a little bit more, you can also use as an all-purpose, but it's the slowest to dry. If you're doing your masking and all that, allow extra time. Next question. Hey, how would you hand paint with lighter colors such as white or lemon yellow? They don't seem to brush. I'm still helping this individual in an ongoing thread, but happy to enlighten others who happen to watch the video. A paint is mostly made up in its liquid state of a binder, a thinner, and a pigment. The thinner evaporates and all you've got is the resin of the binder and the pigment. The pigment is made out of a colour material to represent the colour. The most expensive pigment, besides metallics, which do have a tendency of charging more in the hobby field and art, is white, and it's made of titanium or titanium oxide. Because it costs so much, they cut the amount of pigment and the paint is far more transparent. So when you're putting it over anything else that's not white or yellow, it's going to have some sort of grey undertone or just look really washed out and not pure. Artist white has a much thicker content of titanium, but they charge a significant more amount and actually tells you about its transparency levels. There is a few ways to get around it to have a very vibrant white, mostly revolving around what you do as your undercoat. After priming, you can have a few layers of white, utilize a white primer and then put more coats of white over it. Use a paint with a higher pigment density, but my personal favorite is using a very light reflective color undercoat. Light bounces off a surface and it's a matter of fact of does it bounce off the pigment or does it bounce off the material. If you spray a surface in silver and then white on top of it and the white is traveling through the white pigment, it will bounce off the silver and it'll have the illusion of being a really bright white. Trick number 2 is you go to one of the premium brands of acrylic paint. and choose a white and a brand that is known to have a high pigment density of titanium or a very low transparency rating. You mix 1 drop of that very thick paste-like paint into a jar of acrylic or lacquer, doesn't matter, mix it through, and that actually doubles the pigment content. You could even put a 2nd drop if you want. Those tiny tubes of only a few mils or grams of paint will set you back about $20-30, but if you put 1 drop in every jar of white you use over time, it actually works out to be quite cost effectively in your application of whites and finishes. This should work both for hand painting and airbrushing. Do not worry about compatibility because the artist paint is virtually only thinner vehicle and pigment. It'll absorb into the existing binder of the hobby product you are using. Can you sell some of your kits so you can afford a better camera and mic? No. I have a very old computer and other setup. It's a bit more complicated than that. Would much rather to leave the platform. Does it come with a kangaroo? No, it does not. Oh no, more of them. The Korean gentleman thinks I am injuring him somehow, and another chap thinks I should stop buying and promoting cheap junk airbrushes due to the fact that he is an airbrush teacher. I think his methods are probably a bit outdated. I do get months like this from time to time. Not as good as the faking gay days of almost 10 years ago. I enjoyed the trolling back then. Heading straight to Facebook, a bit empty. Hey Ma.K, do you take commissions? And yes, I do. I've got this current project through a friend of a friend, which is quite fascinating. All of the commissions that I do, I also document in video form and share, and none of it is really done in private. I'm very likely to knock them back, and I'm also a bit selective of projects. If I do not choose to pick it up, I do have a network of friends where I refer them along to someone who's very talented and most likely even more skilled than me. Most of the time I have a waiting list and do not overburden myself, as there is other projects like the injection molding gig and running events as well as sales. Well, that completely concludes our Q&A session. Thank you very much for those who sent in questions, requests, or done any sort of interaction. It's an absolute lot of fun. I enjoy making these long videos. I hope you like listening in and you learnt something, a bit informed, or at least just entertained. All links to sources, shout-outs, stores, all that sort of thing is in the comment section. Not the comment section, the description section down below, so you can have a look and check out. We'll catch you guys next time. Stay tuned for more content. Check out the social media, and we'll definitely do this again next month, if not a little later on. Catch you guys next time.